Hi designers! In this video we're going to be talking about color theory, and you're going to be using the selection tools and the paint bucket to create your own color wheel and then to demonstrate various color schemes: complementary, monochromatic, achromatic, and triadic. Go to the Media Arts Share Drive and download this worksheet, which is called 2.3 Color Theory. And when you download it, it should be blank, and you can see I'm going to turn off the visibility on my various layers. If you hadn't noticed before, see this icon on your layers panel right next to a layer that looks like an eye? That's the visibility, and so you can turn visibility on or off depending on if you're maybe looking for a layer or if you don't want to work on that layer. That's a really cool, useful thing in Photoshop. And so when you download the worksheet, it should look like this, all blank. And we're going to start with the primary colors, which are red, yellow, and blue. And according to basic color theory, these are the three colors from which all other colors in the world can be mixed. You might have learned this in elementary school or in a previous art class, and it's a really easy way to remember how colors work. And basic color theory also tells us that if you take equal mixtures of two primary colors, like yellow and blue, you'll make a secondary color, and in this case is green. So we also have our secondary colors. In just a minute, I'm going to show you how to fill these in. So equal amounts of yellow and blue make green, equal amounts of yellow and red make orange, and equal amounts of red and blue make purple. Then in between the primary and the secondary colors, we have what are called intermediate colors. So equal mixes of both the primary and the secondary, like red and orange make red-orange. These 12 hue families, hue is the term for pure color, as you see here on your worksheet. It's the name of the color. These 12 hue families are a way for us to divide all colors into different groups. And as artists and designers, it's really useful for us to be able to clearly communicate with each other what we mean. For instance, blue-green, we have different words for this. We could call it aqua or turquoise. However, my idea of those colors or your idea might be different, but if we say blue-green, we know what color family we're talking about. Remember, hue is one of the three characteristics of color. We're also going to talk about intensity and value. So going back, to fill in your primary colors, you're going to use the polygonal lasso and select this area. And then use your paint bucket. If you don't see your paint bucket over here on the toolbar, it is underneath the gradient tool. The shortcut for both of those is G. And then you're going to use the color picker. You might notice your swatches up here, which that's okay, or you might have sliders up here for color, a color panel. But what I want you to use this time is the foreground color picker at the bottom of your toolbar. And you'll notice two things. You'll notice the spectrum slider, which has different hues, and then you also have the color picker, which shows you various values and intensities of that hue. So we're going to take the spectrum slider and slide it all the way up to red. And you'll notice that at the upper right-hand corner is your most intense version of that color. So make sure you pick right up there at the upper right-hand corner. Click OK. And then you're going to use the paint bucket tool to fill in this area. Now you'll notice I have a cancel sign. It won't let me fill anything in. That's because I have an invisible layer selected. I need to make sure that I click on the layer that I want to fill in. And in this case, you're going to create a new layer. Right here next to the trash can is the new layer button, and you can double click and rename this primary colors. This just helps us stay organized. So fill that in. Then you're going to repeat that for both blue and yellow so that they look like this. Make sure you get nice even versions. Red is very easy because it's at the top and the bottom of our hue spectrum slider. However, yellow, you want to make sure you're right in the middle in between green and orange, that you're not too greenish or too orangish. Same thing for blue. You're looking for a nice even blue, not an aqua or blue-green or a blue-violet. Next, you're going to do the same thing. Use your polygonal lasso to select the hexagons, which are the secondary colors. Remember, if your polygonal lasso does something weird like this, all you need to do to finish that selection is double click and then deselect, which is Command D, and remake your selection. Create a new layer for your secondary colors and then fill it in with purple, green, and orange. And you can have your instructor help you with this. You want an even color in between the two primaries. So if I go to my color picker, you want a violet, or another term for that is purple, that's right in between. It's not too red. In this case, it looks magenta or pinkish if we go too far towards red, and we don't want it too blue. So you want something that's right in between. Same thing with orange and with green. Now for your intermediate colors, you're going to use the elliptical marquee tool. This creates selections in a circle, and if you hold Shift, it will create a perfect circle. And if you want to move your circle over, you can hold spacebar on your keyboard and you can move that circle around. That way you can select just that area. Create a new layer using the button right next to the trash can to create a new layer. Name it intermediate colors, and then fill in your intermediate colors with your paint bucket. Now you'll notice on my example that each of the intermediate colors is right in between the primary and the secondary. This is most difficult with blue-violet and with red-orange. You want to be able to see a distinction between the three colors. So orange should look different than red-orange, should look different than red. Same thing for each of the colors. So that all 12 hues are equally spaced around your color wheel. And you can have your instructor or sometimes even your neighbor take a look at your colors and you can ask them if they look equally spaced. Alright, so now you have a complete color wheel. These again are the 12 hues or the 12 different color families that we use in design. Down here at the bottom you can fill in two different color schemes that we've already talked about. Two triadic color schemes, the primary hues, red, yellow, and blue, and the secondary hues, orange, green, and purple. And you'll want to use your type tool to label those. You'll notice that these colors create a triangle or a triad on the color wheel. They're very contrasting color schemes, and so the colors will really stand out when placed next to each other. The next color scheme that you're going to create is achromatic. And I'll go ahead and bring up my example here. Achromatic means without color. So they're completely neutral. They range from white to black in this case. You can also think of this as a value scale. You're going to use your rectangular marquee tool to select the rectangle, create a new layer, name it achromatic, and then you're going to fill this in. Instead of filling this first box in white, I want you to fill it in a very light gray, just so that we can see that there is some color here. So if we look at the color picker, on the right hand side we have the most intense versions of the color. On the left hand side we have achromatic colors. So if I show you a gray here, if I slide the slider on the spectrum over here, you'll notice the gray doesn't change, even though the hue in the color picker is changing. So on the left side we have our achromatic values. They're not even colors. So choose one for your first one that's just slightly gray, fill it in, and then each step should be about an equal step down the value scale. And so just an equal step down the color picker here to make successively darker grays until you get all the way to black. The next color scheme is monochromatic, and maybe if you're in Latin you know that mono means one and chroma means color. So together we have one color, and this color scheme uses different tints and shades of one hue. And so in this case you're going to select a hue. It can be any of your 12 hues on the color wheel. And because we want to match the hue to what we've created on our color wheel, we're going to use a new tool, the eyedropper tool. And what this tool does is it sucks up the color and uses it in the foreground. So in this case I wanted to use blue-green, so I suck up that color, and then it's ready for me to use over here in my foreground color. I can use my paint bucket and fill that in. Then what you can do is move the marquee selection over. And shades in design means darker versions of a hue. So if we look at our color picker here, we have our blue-green, and if I go down just slightly on the right-hand side, I will get a darker shade of that color. And then you want to make 3 shades. And you'll notice this says black, but I want you to create a very dark version of the hue, in this case, a very dark blue-green. Okay. Now on the other side you have your tints, and in art and design, tints means to add white, and you can remember that really easily by remembering that the I in white goes with the I in tints, and the A in shades goes with the A in black. Okay. It can be a little bit confusing unless you use that memory tool, because we normally think of tinting our windows, making them darker, but in design we tint by adding white. So if we have our pure hue up here in the upper right hand corner, to create a tint we're going to go towards the right, but we're going to keep our picker all the way up at the top. And you'll notice that the hue is getting lighter as we go across. So you can create 3 tints this way as well. Your complementary colors are colors that are across from each other on the color wheel. So we have yellow and purple, blue and orange, and green and red. And you might recognize those colors by some sports teams like Lakers colors or Broncos colors. And the reason that sports teams will use these colors is because they're contrasting. They stand out. When you put yellow next to purple, it really stands out. The other interesting thing about complementary colors is that when you mix them together, they dull each other, okay? Or they make less intense versions of the colors. So we're going to start off here with yellow on the left. You use your marquee tool and fill it in. You can also use your eyedropper if you'd like to suck up that same yellow color. And then violet on the right, or purple on the right. And when you come to do the next step down in your complementary scheme, move over your selection tool. You're going to go diagonally in the color picker. So this is going to be both darker and less intense as it gets closer and closer to gray. So I want you to go about 1/3 of the way to match that color, and then use your paint bucket tool to fill it in. You can use your marquee tool to move the box over, go back to your color picker, move it about 1/3 of the way again to get an even duller color, and then fill it in with your paint bucket tool. This middle one should be very close to gray, or it should be brown. Now in Photoshop it's really easy just to drag it all the way over and get an achromatic color. But what I'd like you to do is to find a brown that's down in this area, or an olivey color in this case for the yellow, and to select that and to fill that in. If you look closely, you'll see each one of my neutrals is slightly different. This one's a neutral yellow, this one's a neutral blue, and this one's a neutral red. But they should be showing how when you mix red and green together, they become neutral. If we were doing this with paints, we'd actually be mixing the paints together. Photoshop just works a little bit differently. So you're going to do the same thing with your secondary colors on the right side, and with your primary colors on the left side. Alright, so that's basic color theory for you. We'll also talk about RGB and CMYK in the next video.